Well, first of all, it's a great question. And when you get pummeled 4-0, as Arsene quite rightly reminded me backstage, that it doesn't matter whether you win or you lose, the process of a coach should be the same. But having had so many players play in their first Champions League final, or maybe their first at a big stage, I think it was quite overwhelming. So I would have gone to a back three if I could do it again. Probably pushed into a back five because of the way Barca played, but at least give the team a little bit of confidence because they're certainly overwhelmed in the first 20 minutes. Beyond that, the reality is I think you have to have that setback in order to grow from it, and I think we've been able to progress from there because the players need to experience that moment too, and their own, whether it's their own personal setbacks, and learn from that. So yes, tactical things maybe, but I almost think losing is what you have to do sometimes to be able to be at next level.
Arsene.
Well, yes, sorry, my voice is not very good. But yes, I would change something to play with 3 centre-backs in the last 20 minutes. The funny thing with that season is that we lost only one game. That's fine in the whole season.
Yep.
And we played with 10 men for 70 minutes. So, but when you lose a game, and we just lost 2-1, we were 1-0 up and missed many times the second goal against Barcelona. But when you lose a game, you have to go home and think, what could I have done differently?
So why didn't you make the change? Did it run through your mind and you couldn't do it?
Well, yes, the team was not used to it. And I felt that Sol Campbell played only in the final and was tired, so I should have given him a bit more comfort because we conceded a goal because he had to go out on the left and because he was tired, had no time to come in the game. But I believe that every game you lose, you have to go home. And even when you win, you have to go home and think, what could I have done differently?
So we have a lot of people that lead in the room, and we know sometimes that can be lonely as a leader, right? Making hard decisions. How have you been able to personally handle pressure, criticism, and how do you help your teams navigate that? Whether it's a big game, whether it's social media, we're in such a visible world these days. How have you personally handled pressure? Arsene, let's start with you.
Well, I think what is important to me. I believe that personally I had a good capacity to absorb pressure and not to show that I suffered. So you have to hide your emotions. Because I started at a very young age, 32 or 33, I was coaching the top league. At the start, it was very difficult for me. I thought I would never survive. But because I was young, I learned to cope with it. After that, I believe as well that when you're under huge pressure, most of the time it comes from external factors. And that created discomfort inside. With time going on, when I was under huge pressure, I always thought, why am I doing this? What is important to me in all that fuss? And try to refocus, recenter on what mattered to me and go to the priorities. At the end of the day, I believe that the real intelligence is always to see where the priority is. And the priority is how you can deal with that kind of pressure. And knowing as well that when the leader is under pressure, it goes to the team. Because the players know that, they see that. And so you have to remain calm and focused on what is important for you.
That's great. Slight twist for you on this question. Criticism. Being a woman. What are your thoughts on that? Think it's different?
Yeah, completely. Because no matter what you do, you're going to be held to the highest expectation. It's not good enough just to win. It has to look perfect in almost everything. And I think that scrutiny, I think maybe I've just come to accept that. And to be honest with you, with age it's got easier. And I think about being a head coach when I was at the Chicago Red Stars. This was the days of when Twitter first started. I was like, I was overwhelmed with that. So I think early on in my career I struggled with it. Now I just have processes in place, clear rules. I won't read the social media. For one reason that I think is important to protect your own confidence, and it starts with yourself. So I will always place that as a priority. The second one is recover, because you're dealing with adrenaline. And when you've got a game every 3 days, it's adrenaline, crash. I always say to people, it's like having a hangover without the alcohol. We all know what a hangover's like, and it's no fun, but on the crashes, you know you've got to get yourself right to be able to go again. And most importantly, maybe I've learnt this a lot from a lot of brain endurance courses over the years, or military tactical courses, is that even if you're struggling internally, you need to be a great actor, and that your people feel when they read that from you. So just take a moment, take time out. Maybe, especially when you're dealing with the press, for me that's the big one, and making sure you're really clear before you deliver any interview. You know what you want to say, and you're not going into anything emotionally driven.
I think one of the things that, how did I deal with it? Well, I think honestly, similar to Emma, it's, you know, people used to say, oh, you're not on Twitter, are you worried about criticism? And I always used to say, you know, I'm not worried, I don't really want to read how well or poorly my team played. I had a front row seat. I don't need someone's opinion who, honestly, if I wouldn't ask their opinion, I don't want to hear their opinion, right? So I think it's tuning out stuff like that, it's staying true. I think also having good people around you that you can be yourself and manage that. But I always sort of say, as a leader, you've got to try and manage the internal, or control the internal, manage the external. It's tuning that out. But similar to you, Arsene, I think leaders have to absorb, not reflect pressure and stress.
I believe as well in this moment, it's many times I give that advice to young coaches when we're under pressure. Believe your eyes, not your ears. You know?
Yep, exactly.
And at the end of the day, you have to be true with what you see. And that becomes very important, and not what people talk around you too much.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think as coaches, it's very hard to not realize that social media is such a massive part. So protecting players in that way, helping them, guide them, I think is critical these days. Not to take us on a downer, take a moment of failure. Obviously, I learned from the Champions League, but maybe it's a moment that you've rebounded. So we win a World Cup in 2015. 2016, we crash out at the Olympics. Lowest finish ever. And for me, I look to that moment and I think failure is really, what is it? It's two things. You get feedback, right? And then you create an opportunity to grow from there. How have you dealt with failure, and how do you propel it forward for yourself?
Well, first of all, it depends what failure is. It's so subjective. Sometimes failure for me can be having a bad exchange or a bad communication with one of the players that doesn't go particularly well, or making mistakes in a very small way that you have to own. When it comes to losing trophies, no coach wants to lose the opportunity to win things. But I think I'm extremely process driven, and because of that, whether you win or you lose, the process remains the same. And it is, as cliched as it is, you can't get too high and you can't get too low. And you've got to constantly work at making sure you stay in the middle of that. And I do think that gets easier with age, because everybody's got an opinion, everybody's going to judge. I think protecting the team and each other becomes critical. And as long as it's healthy in your environments to reflect on, you know, what didn't work as well as you wanted to, rather than everything seems so catastrophic. And I always say this about the World Cup, and I'm not referencing the US here before you go there, but it's 7 games. You play 6, 7 games, and then everybody overanalyzes and overthinks. And tell the story about winning one year and then losing the other in terms of expectations, or that you have to produce to your.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that, after 2015, I met with our players and said, congrats, world champions, you're on the summit, but guess what? And this is what I've learned, right? Success and failure almost have the same starting point. This is kind of what I said to the players after 2015 is, you're on top of the mountain, but mountains are small for a reason. You've got to climb again, right? So sustaining success, you've got to climb again. But similar to that, if you fall off the mountain, guess where you're starting? So I think to your point, it's like success and failure, if you're true to the process and you're true to the evolution and learning, it's the same starting point. And I think that's how we've, tried to just continue to, we live this idea of how do we get better every day. Arsene, I'd love your opinion on how you've had such a successful career. How did you sustain success? Was it kicking players out so you had a fresh locker room every year, or tell us?
Well, I would say in your case, for example, it's a good example in the Olympic Games because there's often a confusion between the manager and the leader. And when we are in this job, like you were, you move from a leader to the manager, and from the manager to the leader constantly. And then the manager organizes, plans, sets targets. The leader inspires, motivates, fights with the players to get them to their best. And then you have to analyze, where did I fail, as a manager or as a leader?
Great point. Great point. Well, let's flip a little bit now to Arsene, what your role is and what you're doing with development across the land. You're leading the development group. If you could just share some of the things that FIFA is doing in the development specific to helping grow the women's game. I've been fortunate here. I was just traveling the other day and I was in Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and you're seeing this commitment to try and not just give girls an opportunity to play, because we realize it's bigger than that. Tell us a little bit about the development work that you're doing and your staff.
Development all over the world?
Yep.
But it's quite simple. Half of the world, people don't get a chance to play and to develop. So that's the basic target of our program with my team. We want to give everybody a chance. And we want to give girls and boys a chance all over the world. We know that that's not the case, but we develop academies for 12 to 16-year-olds. And at the end of this year, we'll have 30 academies. And we develop our own coaches as well to go into the academies all over the world. We want to transform, to change the world, and we need, of course, all the MAs to help us to do that. But I believe really football can change the world. And if we do it well, we will. Not only on the footballing side, even on the human side. And that's our next big target is on the educational level.
Yeah, that's terrific. And Emma, obviously you've seen from the start, you've been in football a long time like I was, you've seen such tremendous growth. How has that changed potentially how you've coached, you've managed, you've adapted, and what are your thoughts on the growth of the game? It's a big question.
Yeah, when I think about that maybe 21-year-old getting off of a plane in America to the 46-year-old mother now, there's been huge learning curves that I think one thing I will always value is learning from my players. I love to learn from them. Because I always say to people, as a coach from the touchline, we see the game horizontally and they see it vertically. And because of that, what we might see as something that's acting out in the game, a goalkeeper might see something quite different. So the ability to listen is critical. One, to keep evolving. I always say, as I age, they remain the same age. So, and this doesn't just mean like getting a TikTok account. I don't mean that. No, I do have a TikTok account. Yeah, but it helps me for like maintaining my own health and youthfulness, not because I want
Dancing?
I mean, my son likes doing it. We have a go, but not for, public, consumption. But no, for me, it's players are pivotal. I love learning from them. Secondly, keep surrounding yourself with better people and who are better in different areas. So whether that's identifying that I have a particular passion for attacking play, Like that, being creative and attacking in a certain way is what I'm passionate about. But my assistant is absolutely as obsessed with defending. So getting those things right. But then, and for me, I'm all about no silos. You know, you've got to sync up from your medical team, your movement teams, your technical teams, speak the same language, have the same principles, have the same job. But that's years of application. And most importantly, have an environment that is where there's constant reflection and feedback in all directions so that you keep learning.
Yep. Arsene, did you have to change your coaching style with the younger generation?
Yes, change as a person as well.
Yep.
When I was 33 years old, I was in front when we made physical work, of course. In 69, I couldn't do it anymore. But as well, you change as a person.
Yep.
And you lose something of a coach is as well a fighter. And as you spoke about, Emma, you lose a bit adrenaline with age. You compensate, or you think you compensate. It's not always the case, by having a better capacity to anticipate the problems. And you can see what will happen. You have 1, 2, 3 coups in advance of what will happen, and that helps you to avoid many problems. But I still think a coach, to survive, he has to create trust. And trust is linked what I call with 3C. Communicate, be consistent in your attitude. Don't change your attitude when you have 1 or 2 bad results. Be consistent with your beliefs. And the final part is to create that trust, is to be capable to connect. Connect means come really out of you and see who you face on the other side. And if a coach is not that capacity to create that connection, intimacy, basically,
Yep.
that reciprocity in the trust, you cannot last.
Yep. No, I completely agree. I think even when you're building out your staff, when you're young, you want to do everything. You put down the cones, you draw up the plan, and then as you get older, you start to realize you're so much smarter.
Why did you stop to manage?
Why did I stop to manage? Oh, damn, Arsene. Well, the national team, it was more of, I'm always something, I like to build things. So I think it was this idea that I've sort of done my time there, built this, and now it's like I wanted to try and do something else. I also think as we age, becomes more important about what we do for those that come after us than what we personally need to do ahead of us. So getting into the women's professional landscape, the NWSL in America, it just made sense. I wanted to help that landscape and continue to grow and just grow the game for players and selfishly create opportunities for women. We have a female head coach, female general manager. Don't worry, we've got some guys in the organization, but that idea of helping create that next generation of leaders. Because I'm sure Emma's the same. We hear so many times, where are all the female coaches and where are the female leaders and why don't we get these certain time slots and everything like that. At the end of the day, we need more women in leadership positions making decisions and more allies and men advocating for us.
And we need to develop the expertise, because as women we're not small men, and we have so much expertise coming in that's come from the men's game. And as a result of that, and I always say this to any staff member that starts working at Chelsea, we don't let them have any interaction or hands-on interaction with a player for at least 6 weeks until they have almost removed their own biases from coming from maybe a male academy or a men's team, and they're to learn about women's bodies, they're to learn about the differences in the women's game, their menstrual cycle, sleep, nutrition, and the performance elements around it. And after they've had that learning, then they're to impart the next levels. Because what I've realised, people like yourself dropping out of coaching, I'm sure there's plenty of coaches in the room, but we need more experts in general around the women's game. And hopefully, for me, they're the next steps. We've developed a whole industry around women's research, women's bodies, and how to bring the best out of our women. So,
Well, we're gonna open this up to some questions here, but I'm just because listen, had the privilege and pleasure. I've known Emma for a long time. Arsene, I've gotten to know very well. I actually call him Yoda because you can tell he just has an incredible knowledge. So I'm just gonna go random right now. Just with some questions. Henri or Perez?
I hate you.
Come on, these are hot answers, man.
Henri had everything, but without Pires, he would not have been Henri.
I got you. All right, we're going random. Cat or dog? Dog. Cat or dog? Cat or dog? Dog, really?
Yeah.
Nice. I thought the Frenchman was going to go with the kitty cat, but nah. Okay. Me, I thought both. I'm kind of like Noah's Ark at my house, so I have to abstain on that one. Cabernet or Merlot?
Cabernet.
Shiraz.
Shiraz.
Arsene.
You play away from home.
Yeah, always.
Old Trafford or Anfield?
I would say I learned to love English football at Anfield. The first time I came to England, it was at the game in Anfield, and I fell in love with what I saw. And I understood that day that I had to work here.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to hit you with this one. Run DMC or Snoop Dogg?
Snoop Dogg, I don't know what it is, but
All right.
That's because he's got the best Instagram.
We want to see your TikTok, Arsene. All right, we got a question here to all the panelists. Oh my goodness. Being a current or former coach, to what extent should coaching decisions and processes, man, it's heavy, be data-driven or data-informed? Oh, that is a good question. Because Emma has like 17 analysts at, and Arsene didn't need one. But data and our decision-making, for me on a personal level, it's a balance, right? You've got to trust your experiences when you make decisions about personnel and lineup, and then I think, but data sometimes either supports the narrative. I used to tell our players with the women's national team, we have X% of goals are scored when we regain the ball higher up the field. Why'd I say that? Because I wanted our forwards to work their asses off and defend hard, and they did it because they bought into that. Data, its role in your decision making?
Informed for me, and we have a team that help with insights.
Yep.
But it's always got to be related to your principles of play.
Exactly.
And if I know that a team, sometimes it can be so misconstrued. So often you might watch a team and they'll say, this player is exceptional on this side of the pitch. We have to, steer the press a certain way. Data insights might tell me that as however good she is, she's even better when the ball's crossed from the other side. So maybe data insights will help me to shape something up which I thought, rather than steering away from a player I thought was successful, actually maybe we give her the ball because she's less of a threat if she's crossing the ball versus getting on to the end of it. So for me, sometimes that's where it helps, but it's all got to be in line with the way the team plays.
Arsene, how much did you use analytics?
We started it at Arsenal, and so I'm quite responsible for many of these things. But overall, I would say that science has to help you to make better decisions. And the coach has to remain a final decision maker because he can analyze really the data better than anybody else.
All right, we've got time for a couple more. This one. How do you manage players nowadays when they are displaying dissatisfaction via social media?
I notice you haven't answered that one.
I don't want to answer that.
No, I mean, I'd be curious from your end on that.
Well, I had a very quiet group of players that, I think, it comes down to, Arsene, what you said earlier, that connection and that communication, and you build that trust. You hope you create an environment where they don't have to go on social media. I remember when I, decided to, going into a World Cup, Carly, an amazing player, an amazing professional, was going to be a game changer coming off the bench for us. And it's actually the media that want to hype it up. And I remember the media would go to Carly and they would say, hey, do you think you should be starting? And of course the player's going to say yes, right? I mean, they should say yes. And then the media would come to me and they would go, hey, your player wants to start, trying to create some conflict. And what I actually learned was, a younger coach, a younger version of myself would have kind of got defensive with that. And I said, I used to say, I'm glad. I want every single player to want to play every minute of every game. But the reality is, this player is going to be an absolute professional and do what the team needs. So I think, you know, players that they're naturally always going to want to have more playing time. Emma, have you had to manage this, deal with this?
Oh my goodness, every day. Like, that is one of the biggest challenges, especially players that are not in the lineup. But maybe they're referencing to the commentator calling them a bench player and are they too good for that? It does affect confidence. For me, it's all about education. It's sitting down and their dopamine levels. They're a generation whose dopamine has been up and down because they've only known social media. So you have to work with it. You can't change it, but it's the education around recognising how to shut it off. And if they're seeking dopamine, i.e., you know, when they put out those messages, some quote that says, you know, it's got this subliminal message that's aimed at a coach or a teammate.
Yep.
I always say to the players, you know, my big phrase is, does this help the team win? And if it's not helping the team win, then think twice about it. And it's a bit like, you know, when we think about saying something that's appropriate or not, if you have to think about that in the first place, then you already know it's not. So just to reflect before you let loose.
All right, last question. We'll go to Arsene. You manage successful teams, winning trophies and titles. What's the secret to keeping a team happy and performing well?
Well, as a coach, you create a culture of performance. And the culture of performance is created by you, by the clarity of the style of play you want to play, and as well by the behaviors. So you have a culture that demands behaviors. When the behaviors are aligned with the culture, you create a cohesion. And when you have a cohesion in the team, you can push it to the edge. And as long as that is always realigned, and when the players as well meet their needs in the team, that means you have a cohesion is created by the fact that the player feels he can improve, and that you set him always targets, so he has clarity about what is his next level. In life, when you know what is your next level, you go for it. But here you have to combine the individual needs and the global needs to create cohesion. And in fact, it would be quite interesting. We have all an idea here. We have a final on Sunday. And when you think what is the team who gives out the biggest, highest level of cohesion, we have all the team in mind. And this team has more chances to win than the other one.
Couldn't have ended it with a better comment. I want you to please give a big hand for Arsene Wenger and Emma Hayes. Backstage for the real conversation. Yeah.